Howdy folks, today I'd like to do a review of the Fishpond San Juan Vertical Chest Pack. I'll start this review out with the general features of the pack, and then I'll go into how I use the pack, including the tackle that I carry for small stream fishing here in the Central Sierras. Okay, so to start out on the exterior of the pack. You've got a number of very versatile and adaptable features. You've got this strap system, the straps that go over your neck, and then another strap that goes, around your back to secure the pack while you're wading through the river, walking along. It keeps the pack from swinging around too much, keeps it secure on your body. One thing I really like about this neck strap, it's very padded, it's comfortable, and then it has this little loop which I use to attach my net to. Anyway, just kind of sticking with the features of the pack. On the very front of the pack, you've got this little pouch here, a great place for split shot, tippet, dry shake, whatever you want to use it for. You've got these little cord loops here on the side of the pouch. You've got Hypalon tabs here on each side. Let's see, what else do we have here? We've got a couple other loops here. We got one cord loop here on the top of the smaller compartment, and we've got a loop here that you could use for a tippet tee. You've got this corded loop on the back of the pack that you could use to kind of hang it up somewhere. And then you've also got this belt loop here where you can attach the pack to a standard belt or a wading belt. Some folks like to attach it to a wading belt. So in addition to this front pouch that I already discussed, we've got two main compartments to the chest pack here, and I'll start with the rear compartment here, the larger of the two compartments. This is a pretty good sized compartment. You can fit a number of things in there as we've just seen. You've also got a smaller sleeve that kind of helps to divide that compartment. And then you've got behind that you've got a smaller zippered pouch that goes right up against the sort of the back wall of the, as it were, the chest pack. So on the front of the pack, you've got this smaller compartment, which kind of opens out. If you've got the pack on, this is going to, fold down here to give you kind of a workstation where you've got this fly patch here that you can use to store flies, or you can just take it out. You can use this Velcro surface here standalone as a drying surface. You can stick flies into it, and then you can use this front pouch is a good place for a smaller fly box. Maybe split shot, just smaller things that don't take up as much room as a large fly box. So in any event, this pack for me has been very versatile. You can configure it in a number of different ways to meet your fishing scenario. It's what we call minimalist, so it's not going to be the best choice for folks that want to have all their gear with them all the time. But if you're somebody that tends to fish with a minimal selection of tackle, or you know the rivers that you fish really well, you can take just what you need and not a lot else. It works great. It's very versatile. The way I set this up and the gear that I use might be completely different than how you use it, but I do recommend this pouch highly. It's worked really well for me. So I'll go into some of the tackle that I carry with me for small stream fishing here in the Central Sierras. Here in the Central Sierras, we've got a lot of small streams with wild trout that make great fly fishing. It's a great place to get started fly fishing. It's really where I've made my start over the past 3 years, and where I've learned the basics of fly fishing that I've been able to apply in some larger rivers and catch fish as diverse as cutthroat trout in Idaho and mountain whitefish in the eastern Sierras, along with larger rainbow and brown trout, using the principles that I learned on the smaller streams. So to get right into it, fly selection. Once again, I'm going to put the fly box in the large compartment here. It doesn't have to be complicated in these smaller streams. Typically during the summer months, the warmer water months, from about June or earlier through September, when the water is low enough to be fishable, the fish are going to go for, they're looking up and they're looking for terrestrials on these small streams, so hoppers and that sort of thing. So for fly selection, I use a lot of what you call attractor flies, and an attractor fly is just kind of a generic fly that maybe doesn't imitate anything exactly, but when the water is flowing quickly and you've got these fish, they get very, what we call, opportunistic. They're not picky, and so we talk about matching the hatch, and that's all great on a spring creek in Montana or Hat Creek in Northern California. A slow moving creek or even some freestone tumbling streams, bigger rivers where the trout get selective because there's a lot of insect life. But in these smaller, less fertile streams, the trout do get very opportunistic, and so it's not rocket science. You don't have to match the hatch exactly. So I generally carry a selection of size 14 through 18 of these attractor kind of generic patterns. So I'll start out with the yellow stimulator. That's been a great fly for me. I carry the Adams, and I carry the parachute Adams because I feel it's a little more visible. I carry a couple different colors of caddis, tan and olive caddis. I carry a few specific ant patterns, and I carry Royal Wolf, size 14 through 16. And the Royal Wolf's a new fly I've just started using this year. It kind of imitates ants as well as larger mayflies. It's been a great fly for me. So the Royal Wolf and the stimulator have been, those are my top two flies. The stimulator kind of imitates a variety of things. You can imitate stoneflies, grasshoppers, larger caddis. It's just a great attractor fly, especially here in the Central Sierra freestone streams. In case the trout get really picky, I carry a few other specialty flies. I carry some beetles. That's a good fly to use with a dry dropper, or what we call hopper dropper scenario, which I'll talk about later. I also carry some of these light Cahills to imitate pale morning duns. I carry a few blue wing olive impersonations there. I carry some very realistic mosquito impersonations for when the trout do get a little bit selective. But that rarely happens. Usually I can stick with a stimulator, a caddis, or a Royal Wolf, and catch trout all day long, especially when the water is just a little higher. So on the other side of my box, this is a two-sided fly box. I've got my selection of nymphs. Once again here, we're talking mainly attractors. We got the pheasant tail, size 14 through 18. We've got copper johns in size 18 and 20. We've got hare's ear. We've got some prints, and we also have a few hare's ear soft hackles. And so these nymphs can be fished either by themselves. I usually don't use an indicator, or they can be fished in what we call a dry dropper combination. A dry dropper is where you just you tie on your main dry fly. You use a little larger, more buoyant dry fly like a stimulator or a Royal Wolf in a size 14, and then you run slightly finer diameter tippet. So say you're running a 5X tippet leader to your dry fly, you might run a 6X dropper. To a much smaller, or at least a bit smaller, bead-headed attractor pattern like a copper john or a pheasant tail. And so what that's going to do is that finer diameter tippet along with the bead-headed, the weighted fly, is going to cause that fly to ride behind and below your main fly. And so you can catch trout that are maybe a little pickier, that aren't quite going for your dry fly, or maybe they've been caught a few times before and they're a little leery or spooky, and so they don't go for your dry fly, but they hit your dropper. So it kind of ups your odds. It does complicate casting a little bit. Some guys will run big hopper patterns with 2 or 3 dropper flies. You have the hopper, dropper, copper, or as Hank Patterson would say, hopper, dropper, hopper, hopper. But you start running all these different flies. It just makes it a lot easier to tangle. When you're casting, makes casting a little more complicated. So I like to keep things simple. I mean, that's why I go fly fishing. It's just it's about getting out, communing with nature, and keeping things simple. So I tend to take a bit of a simplistic approach, but around here for fly fishing, really your presentation and stealth. I mean, sneaking up on the fish, making sure they don't see you, and getting a good drag-free drift, what we call a dead drift, is generally a lot more important than selection. So it's presentation and stealth generally trump selection on most Sierra freestone streams. What else I've got here? I've got my license holder. This holds my fishing license. I usually put my driver's license in there with it. You can put this around your neck. I just like to shove it in the main pouch here. I've got some extra leaders. I usually carry 4X, 5X, and 6X leaders, so I can, if I break or really badly tangle a leader, I can replace it. Also, I like to try and repair leaders, which is why usually for tippet material, you've seen this tippet spool on the outside here. I usually carry 4X through 6X on the outside, or at least 5 and 6X. I usually carry 3X. I use the 3 and 4X to repair the leader. With using triple surgeons knots and blood knots. When I do break a leader off closer to that taper, I can kind of restore some of that taper. Using those heavier leader materials to kind of taper down to my 5 or 6X terminal tippet. So most of the time I fish 5X to my at least my primary dry fly. If I'm going to fish some bigger flies, which I don't have any in the box right now, hoppers, size 10 or 12 flies, I'll go with a 4X leader. You need that heavier leader to turn over those heavier flies. If I'm fishing primarily size 18 flies, late in the season, then I'll go to a 6X, much lighter leader, which gives a little less drag on the water, potentially a little less visible to the fish, a little more natural movement of the fly. Usually can help get more hookups when the water's low, late season, or when the fish are highly pressured. Here in Central California, they're not generally highly pressured. Most of these streams are fairly underutilized. I carry some bug spray, picaridin-based bug spray. I'm not a fan of DEET. I don't like DEET. I don't like the smell. I've had it start to melt plastic items that's gotten on before, so I avoid DEET. I carry a stringer for those rare occasions when I want to turn to the dark side and keep a fish or two. We need to use common sense here. If you go to the stream and you keep 5 fish every day, you're going to fish out that stream in a hurry. You're going to ruin that resource for your other anglers and generations to come. So you don't want to do that. But at the same time, a lot of these Sierra streams where trout are highly populated, they're quite frankly, in my opinion, don't let the guides hear me say this, and I'm sure I'm going to burn in hell, according to all you purists. But I don't see any sin keeping 1 or 2 mid-sized fish. Let the smaller fish go to grow. Let the bigger fish in that stream let them survive and reproduce and also be trophies for other anglers to catch later. But those fish that are kind of middle of the road, those are the ones that sometimes I think about keeping 1 or 2, especially when I'm camping. And that hasn't happened very often. And once again, you have to look at the local regulations and see what the other local anglers. Some streams, local anglers just don't keep fish out of. It's a taboo. Maybe they should, maybe they shouldn't. But generally, if it's the Marble Fork of the Cahuilla River, I'm not keeping anything out of there. Regardless of the regulations, just because that's the tradition with all the local fly clubs and all the local anglers. Catch and release doesn't have to be the absolute religious mandate that a lot of fly fishermen make it. In many cases, you can improve the quality of fishing, by judiciously keeping a few fish. You may have slightly less numbers, but larger quantity, greater quantity of fish in the long run. Let's see, what else? The hook home, important to keep those hooks sharp. You got to keep those hooks sharp. Keep some Umpqua River Grip zippers, or I'm sorry, nippers on an Umpqua zinger here. Dry shake. When you've been fishing your fly for a while and it gets wet, you can get that fly out of the water, false cast it a few times with your rod, flick some of that water off. Dip it in here with the leader. Shake it up. It's going to dry that fly out. You're going to be ready to fish that fly again. I keep the Luna Quell. It's a silicone-based floatant that you apply to your fly before you fish it. Among other things, it has some agent there that supposedly kills human scent. So maybe the fly is gonna, or the fish is gonna, keep your fly in its mouth longer. But it also just kind of pre-treats the fly to keep the fly from getting waterlogged, to keep it riding higher in the water column, and to keep some of the water out of the fly when it gets inhaled by a fish. So it keeps that fly fishing, those dry flies riding higher and fishing effectively longer. So that's my system. Pre-treat the fly with the Luna Quell and use the dry shake, after the fly starts to get wet. So that's about it in a nutshell, folks. One other thing I should mention, I carry a good set of Forceps. These are the Umpqua river clamps. They're made out of high-quality steel, manufactured in Japan. The best set of Forceps I've owned to date. I use these for mashing down the barbs on hooks and then removing hooks from the fish's mouth when they get caught in there in kind of an awkward angle. I mean, typically I can just, I fish barbless hooks, exclusively, and so I can just, put my finger in there and pop it out. But sometimes if it's jammed in there at an angle, you can just, you can use these and get the, just kind of gently dislodge that hook. If the hook's stuck in the trout too deeply, probably the best thing you can do is just clip that leader, because if you try to pull that fish out of the gills or out of the back of the tongue, out of the throat, you can kind of really damage that trout in the process. And with the barbless hook, if you just clip your leader, the end of your tippet, and let the fish go, it's going to work that fly out naturally. So anyhow, that's a review of the Fishpond San Juan vertical chest pack and kind of an overview of the tackle that I commonly carry for fishing small streams in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks.